let's talk about last weekend's fight night. All right, let's talk about what happened. So we thought that the main event was going to be Derek Lewis against Curtis Blades. Unfortunately, on Friday morning, we found out that Curtis Blades was out of the fight. He had to withdraw after testing positive for COVID-19. And so the main event, I should say, got canceled. And so they bumped up Anthony Smith versus Devin Clark. Now, what would happen afterwards was really interesting, DC, because as we know, in this crazy time, when these co-main events are getting bumped up, recently they've been doing them as a 3-round main event, right?
Fight, yeah.
The guys aren't training for 5 rounds. Everyone understands. My understanding was Anthony Smith called the UFC and said, I wanted 5 rounds. He was preparing for a 3-round fight, as was Devin Clark. My understanding was several top executives at the UFC said, sure, 5 rounds, great for us. Main event, why not? Dana White, for whatever reason, said, let's just do it 3 rounds. Let's just keep it as it was, 3 rounds. Anthony Smith called Dana White himself and said, I want 5 rounds. Give me 5 rounds. And he convinced them, and they went 5 rounds. In the end, they didn't need it.
It went like a minute.
Yeah, only went. But I thought that was a really interesting thing. And when you consider the fact that Anthony Smith has had a very tough year, lost 2 fights, got beat up really badly by Glover Teixeira and everything that happened in that fight with his corner, then lost to Alexander Rakic, plus the home invasion. It's been a really tough year for Anthony Smith. The question I ask you is Anthony Smith back, or did he just beat a guy who maybe isn't at his level?
Anthony Smith is still very viable in that weight class. I really believe that. With that being said, very impressive performance. I thought he did great. Him asking for a 5-round fight, very courageous. And the fact that you can convince Dana to do anything is very, very important to you and your standing in the promotion. But he beat Devin Clark, who has shown improvement, right? Devin has gotten better, but Devin Clark is not a guy that is fighting at the top of the division, right? So Anthony, it's good for him to get a victory in that way, but he has to go out and beat another guy. Go beat the guys that he did before. Because reality is, he's very valuable to the weight class, and he's so good and so tough and so skilled, but those are the fights that you're supposed to win, right? You're supposed to win that fight on Saturday. He did. Now he can go back to building himself up towards another championship fight.
When this fight was announced, I reached out to Anthony. I have a good relationship with him. I have no problem saying I think he's truly one of the good guys in this sport, has a great heart, is turning into a great broadcaster as well. He's great on the desk, but it's just a good guy, right? Yeah. And I said, welcome back. Do you like the fight? I was just curious. And I'll be honest, and I don't want to speak for him, but this was the conversation we had. He wasn't all that psyched about the matchup. He felt like,
it was a step down. A bit of a step down. Yeah. Well, that's what happened when the fight was announced. It was like, I spoke to you about this a while back. I don't know exactly who we were talking about. It was Tyron Woodley. And I was like, Tyron needs a guy that kind of is a little bit back in the rankings. But how do you do that with a former champion that has defended his belt so many times? Anthony got that, right? So even though he may not have liked it, he got that. He needed that reset. So in the long run, this will be good for him because
absolutely,
you get to feel good about yourself after a victory. And you heard him say it at the press conference. He's like, I almost forgot what winning felt like.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's crazy to see for a guy that's as talented as Anthony Smith. But when you're fighting killers like Jones, Teixeira, Rakic, like you can lose those fights. And he lost those fights. So it felt good to take a step back, feel good about yourself, and start to move back forward in the rankings and on a path towards trying to become a contender again. Because right now, he isn't. But I thought it was a good place for Anthony.
We love MMA and the UFC because they're very rarely at the top, right? In the major leagues of MMA, there are rarely tune-up fights, right? You don't see that. You see that a lot more in boxing. I don't mind tune-up fights, especially in a case like this. If Devin Clark wins, you got a new name. And if not, Anthony gets his mojo back. He gets his confidence back. You cannot overlook how important the feeling is of getting your hand raised. And that's what I said to Anthony. Do what you got to do, get back on track, and then you'll get those big dogs afterwards. Yeah. And I just feel like looking at him, like it felt like an 800-pound gorilla was taken off his shoulders, right? He got a win, a finish, a submission, a quick one, right? Now let's see, because I got to be honest with you, DC, after the Glover fight, I was worried about Anthony. And then after that fight, when he comes back so soon and fights an up-and-comer like Alexander Rakic, and look the way he did. He looked listless. Remember what we talked
Yeah.
about it? He looked
He didn't look
listless.
as good. Yeah, he didn't look as good. He didn't look as good physically. He didn't look as good like he was as prepared up top. It was too
Exactly.
fast.
So this is just what the doctor ordered for him, right? This was perfect for Anthony Smith. I was happy to see him get his hand raised. I was happy to see him back on track. And now there's a lot of options. After the fight, they were talking about Paul Craig, who had a nice win over Shogun Hua. And I think that's a good fight. But I want to offer you a different kind of fight. I want to offer you a better fight. I want to see, I think the time is now, dare I say, Anthony Smith, Luke Rockhold. Let's go.
Oh,
Let's go.
that's a fight. That's a
Let's
fight.
go.
That's another fight. Yeah, that's a good fight. I think Luke coming back and fighting Anthony Smith. I think they had some bad blood a while back.
They had bad blood. Remember when he lost to Jones, Luke was kind of saying that he was a scrub and all that stuff. And Anthony got really mad about that. Remember, he got really he felt disrespected and he went after him at the press conference. There's bad blood there. Luke is coming back, right?
I wouldn't mind seeing Luke and Anthony if Luke came back, but I would honestly prefer Luke back at 185. I prefer Luke to go back to 185 and fight there. That's just where he's more natural. I mean, he's, and hey, guess what? The Jan Blachowicz loss in hindsight doesn't look all that bad anymore, right?
Not at all.
It does not look all that bad anymore. Everybody talk, Luke Rockhold's done. He got knocked out by Jan Blachowicz. He got knocked out by Yoel Romero. Like, who doesn't?
Right.
Jan Blachowicz, that loss now does not look as bad as it did in that moment. So I'd like to see him come back, but I'd like to see him fight at 185. So I love the fight. I think the bad blood sells itself. And for a guy like Luke right now, who's lost a few times in a row, a couple times, 2 or 3, he's lost 2 in a row or 3? 2, right?
Off the top of my head, he lost to
Romero
and then Jan.
3?
No, Romero and Jan.
Romero and
win
Jan.
over David Branch.
He's lost 2.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's lost 2 in a row. I'd like to see him in those fun fights, right? Those fun fights. Like him and Anthony Smith is a fun fight that it starts off as a fight that just 2 guys that don't like each other, but the winner comes out if they look good. You're like, oh man, maybe this guy is viable still. Maybe he's still a contender. So yeah, I think it's a good one. But hey, Paul Craig, it's like okay, that's a great fight too. I mean, that's a great fight with him and Paul Craig too. It probably is more. It's probably more right for the division and where the division's going. But who can? I mean, you and I both love a fun fight.
Yeah, the bad blood is so much fun, and Anthony's such a nice, mild-mannered guy that
him rag the way he did to Luke, it changed him, right? Like it changed him. I know.
The other one that also makes sense is Thiago Santos, who beat Anthony at 185, and then he moved up, and Thiago's coming off a loss. To kind of makes sense. They both lost to Jones, so there are options for him now that he won. There are options, and I'm happy about that because, like I said, he's one of the good guys in the sport.
I like Anthony Smith. I really do. And it was good for Anthony to get back and win against someone, regardless of what you think of Devin Clark, who had shown a lot of improvement. One thing that stood with me with Devin Clark, one time I spoke to him, he told me he had never been in a fist fight in his whole life.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, this guy, he's not like, Devin is not naturally a fighter, right? He's a guy that's an athlete that has learned and taught himself to be okay inside of an octagon, which is absurd, but he'd never been in a fist fight. So he's not just this natural fighter per se. But Anthony needs to go beat someone else now because there are a lot of people that speak of Anthony, and he beat Rashad, he beat Shogun, and he beat Gustafson, right, on the way to the title.
And
right?
No, Gustafson was after the title.
So he beat Rashad, he beat Shogun, he beat somebody else that was kind of older to get a title shot. Who's the third one?
Gosh, now I'm
and then people were like, "Oh, he never really deserved to fight for the championship." Like it was odd. So for him to go and beat Gustafson, now win another 205 fight, if he can go put one of those bigger names on his resume, I think it would really help people to respect what he brings to this weight class.
Volkan Ozdemir was the other one.
Ozdemir,
right, and title shot.
Yeah, so it's like people were like, "Oh man, this wasn't the hardest path to a title shot." I mean, I fought Volkan for the belt.
Come on, don't laugh at Volkan.